Hello, my name is Jacob Averitt, back with another checkpoint for my final presentation in biomechanics. So, just to recap, my research question is, how do rotational and anti-rotational core exercises compare with the frontal plane, your regular crunches, sit-ups, frontal plane core exercises? How do they compare when trying to build stability in the trunk and increase muscle thickness? So I pretty much looked at 3 different kinds of studies. Studies that really just mainly looked at frontal plane exercises, or a lot of the studies included all 3, but they all included frontal pretty much for the most part, which, like I said, is sit-ups, crunches, whatnot. Rotational exercises, that would be cable chops, medicine ball rotational throws, and the anti-rotational exercises. The main anti-rotational exercise across these studies is the Pallof press, which would be a cable or a band suspended from a stack or a door about chest to sternum height, and they grab that, both hands out, and they take a step out from the wall. So they're pretty much trying to resist the torque or resist the pull of the rope or the cable or band. So anyways, the methodology of these. So for the frontal plane exercise studies, they're both pre and post intervention. They did an EMG of the lateral obliques because, as we've been over, the rotational anti-rotational exercises mainly focus on the obliques. So basically it showed that the frontal plane exercises had less of a difference, or less of an effect on the obliques. But when it comes to those front muscles, the rectus femoris, I believe, it had more of an effect. The rotational exercises were also pre and post intervention, and they also did an EMG. They also measured the torque and muscle activation, which I thought was very interesting. Obviously, there's going to be more torque than a frontal plane exercise because there is no twisting. And then for the anti-rotational exercises, they did Pallof press testing with isometrics, the isometric torque, and it's more of a functional stability test because, there's just so many ways we can get pulled or have to resist something. Your shirt can get caught in the doorknob and it's almost like the same movement. It's more functional. So biomechanics approaches, the frontal plane exercises develop lateral stability and endurance of the obliques and the frontal muscles. I feel like I'll get back to that in a minute actually, but rotational exercises develop the torque, the power, more oblique hypertrophy, and you move at such a much higher velocity, and that would be more of your sport-specific movement as well, like doing a med ball throw to a wall for a baseball player. So that's the population that would really be using those. Anti-rotational, they really just improving stiffness in the trunk and contraction and resistance to rotation. That was more of the general population, because you're actually supposed to start with anti-rotational and move on to rotational, because if you have such a low baseline of physical fitness, moving all herky-jerky and dynamically might actually hurt you. So limitations to these studies: with the frontal plane studies, there was limited torque development. They really just didn't look at it. Obviously, there's probably not much to look at, but also it seemed mostly endurance-based. Just how many sit-ups can you do in a minute? That was the majority of the studies, and it wasn't so much that the muscle had contracted so many times to where it was physically fatigued. It was more so like cardiovascular based, because they're trying to burn themselves out for a minute just doing crunches or sit-ups. The rotational exercises actually show that it may not improve trunk stability or endurance, but one thing about a limitation with that was the sample sizes were so small. With the frontal plane exercise, there are upwards of 20, 30, 40 people in these studies. With the rotational, a lot of them only had 5 or 6 people. So I felt like that was they definitely should have had a larger sample size and really see how that carries on, especially across multiple different groups of populations, like your athletes, your non-trained, your gen pop, general population. And into anti-rotational exercises limitations, they really felt like, since that is such a baseline movement, it wasn't really going to transfer over to like sport specific, which I could see that. I mean, since it's so, like a baseball player could probably resist so much weight, or any type of rotational athlete resist so much weight or so much force. So I felt like the most trustworthy study was, honestly, any study that uses an EMG, electromyography, which that was the frontal plane and the rotational. I felt those were the most trustworthy, just because you can actually see numerically the difference that the exercise is made, as opposed to, which this is nice too, as opposed to just adding weight on an anti-rotational movement. You can actually see electromyography, like the difference in the muscular thickness. But in summary, you honestly should do a combination of all three, of course. So many people always just do the frontal plane. That's what we grow up on, is sit-ups and crunches. And from then on, because you're probably already going to be doing that or have some experience, I would move to the anti-rotational, your pile-off press. I would probably start with the band before doing a cable, and then I would move on into my rotational exercises. Obviously, I mean, the old school bodybuilders would just use a broomstick and just do that. I work with some athletes now where I'll actually have them work up to like a 25-pound barbell, just doing rotations, not super dynamically, but moving. So basically, I am all wrapped up with that. I've enjoyed this study. I feel like I've learned a lot from the last checkpoint to now, just because I've been able to break it up into looking more at anti-rotational, how it compares to rotational, and that kind of reverse engineering it will help me look at how that will compare to the frontal plane exercises. So yeah, that is my checkpoint. Have a great day.